So hello and welcome everyone to today's SAP Community Call. My name is Minina Chow and I am part of the SAP Community team. Today we have Morten Wittrock with us talking about automate your integration governance with open source software. And Morten is an SAP mentor and SAP press author and I think much more, but I don't want to talk too much about this now because I know Morten will introduce himself too. So that's why I would like to make you all aware of the Zoom at first. So for those of you who have not been in the Zoom call yet, you will find a button or the functionality Q&A somewhere on your screen at the top or at the bottom. This is where you can type your question, and Morten and I will save some time at the end to attend your questions. And of course you can speak up, and therefore you would need to raise your hand. And there's a functionality here where you can raise your hand and we'll unmute you then. But for now, I would like to hand over to Morten and let you start your community call.
Yeah, thanks, Menina. Yeah, thank you for having me on the call today. My name is Morten Wittrock. Hang on, let me switch the slides. I'm a principal architect in the area of integration at KMD in Denmark, where I'm sat right now at the office, actually. I'm also part of the SAP Mentors program, and I help organize the SAP Inside Track Copenhagen event. I also fairly often visit other Inside Track events as a speaker. I do some blogging on the SAP community site as well. The link is here, and I'm on Twitter. You'll get the slides afterwards sent to you somehow. So, since the topic of today revolves around SAP Cloud Platform Integration, I thought I'd start by giving you just a very brief introduction to the platform. So yeah, SAP Cloud Platform Integration, or just CPI, it's shorter. It's SAP's integration platform for the cloud. So from a high-level viewpoint, it's very similar in concept to the on-premise integration platforms like SAP PI, but CPI is built specifically from the ground up for the cloud. It's part of the product category called SAP Cloud Platform Integration Suite, along with services like API management and the open connectors, enterprise messaging, and so on. Under the hood, it's based on the Apache Camel open source integration framework. And then in CPI, you model your integrations visually using the so-called integration flows. And this is an example of an integration flow. We're just going to call them iFlows. That's shorter. So basically a visual modeling of an integration of a process. This specific one is the ERP to SuccessFactors cost center replication iFlow. It's part of the prepackaged integration content that SAP delivers, which is one of the really strong selling points of CPI. So this is just to show you an example of an iFlow. And the iFlows, they give you a lot of freedom in how to build your integrations. You have a lot of options, right? And that's a good thing, definitely. The other side of that coin is that the more options you have, the harder it gets to achieve some sort of coherence across your integrations, right? And that means a higher need for governance, basically. And part of that governance is guidelines for how to build those integration flows. So those guidelines could be just a few examples. When you do transformation, you should always use message mapping. If you do scripting, it should always be written in Groovy. Maybe you're not allowed to use the social media adapters like the Facebook adapter, Twitter, and so on. Or it might be don't do basic authentication over unencrypted HTTP because you're sending passwords in plain text. So just some examples of what those guidelines might be, right? And that's not a problem, but there's a problem built into having those guidelines, and that is that most of the time they'll sit in a network share somewhere on a SharePoint inside a Word document. And that works to the extent that you can point your developers, your consultants to that document and say, this is how we develop iFlows around here, right? But how do you know whether the integrations that are being built are actually in compliance with those rules that you set out in the guidelines? And in a nutshell, you don't know, because the only way to find out is to basically start from the top and inspect every iFlow manually to check whether it's in compliance. And that doesn't really scale in any sense of the word, right? And the problem only grows with the number of developers, the number of consultants, and the amount of integration content, to the point where it's impossible to stay on top of the governance. And that's exactly the problem that CPILint exists to solve. So let's talk a little bit about what CPILint is. It's a tool that lets you write developer guidelines that you can execute. So unlike the Word document, right, which you can read and nothing else, with the CPILint developer guidelines, they become executable. That means that you select a number of rules that you want your iFlows to comply with. And then the tool does all the work of checking each iFlow for compliance. It does the same work that you would do manually, but it does it much, much faster, obviously. It then presents you with the iFlows that are not compliant, and you can take action on that, right? But all the work of actually going through the iFlows, checking them against the rules, that's done by the tool. You can run it on your computer interactively, or you can schedule it somehow in like a continuous integration pipeline or whatever you feel like. And the result is that your guidelines are no longer gathering dust in SharePoint, and that's nice. It ships with a number of rules built in, covering the various categories of CPI, like adapters, security mappings, scripting, and so on. The rules in themselves are not best practices, so you won't be using all of them at all times, since some of them probably won't make sense in your particular situation. So you're just going to apply the ones that do make sense to describe your local developer guidelines. A little bit about the name. Why is it called CPILint? Yeah, we can break it down into CPI. I already mentioned that's SAP Cloud Platform Integration for short. Lint or a linter is a tool. This is just a Wikipedia definition, right, that detects your programming errors, bugs, stylistic errors, and suspicious constructs. There are a ton of linters out there. You might know maybe ESLint for JavaScript, or there's even one for ABAP-lint, and many, many others. So CPILint is basically just a linter for cloud integration, like a tool that checks your work. So I'm going to show you a very brief demo. This is the iFlow that I'm using for the demo. It's very simple. Just has an HTTPS center channel, an XSLT mapping, and a Groovy script. And I'm going to check that iFlow against these rules. This is a CPILint rules document. It's just an XML document containing the rules that I want to apply. I just selected a few here for this demo. The first one says that every sender HTTPS channel should have cross-site request forgery protection enabled. The next one says that every iFlow should have a description. That seems reasonable. Then there's a rule about which scripting languages are allowed, and I'm only going to allow Groovy. There's a rule about the allowed mapping types, specifically message mapping and XSLT. And then a more specific one about XSLT that says XSLT in itself is fine, but we don't allow version 1.0 XSLT. So those are the rules I'm gonna run. So I'm gonna switch to the command line. So CPILint is a command line tool. I've got it installed on my machine here. Let me check if it's actually working. It is. CPILint version 1.0.1. So what I've got here is the rules document, the XML document, and the iFlow, which I've downloaded to my computer. I downloaded it in order to, not tempt fate for the demo and anger the demo gods. But usually you would just point the tool to your tenant and run directly against your tenant, right? And check all your iFlows. But for simplicity, I've downloaded the iFlow to my computer. It's just a zip file. And I'm going to run the tool. So I need to point it to my rules file. And I need to point it to the iFlow that I want to check. I could provide several iFlows or a directory full of iFlow files, but I'm just going to point to that single file for the purposes of this demo. So it has run, and yeah, if you go to the last line, it's inspected one iFlow, and it found 3 issues. It turns out that my sender HTTPS channel did not have CSRF enabled. The iFlow did not have a description, and also, yeah, there's a line break. It doesn't fit the screen here, but the XSLT style sheet was version 1.0, which wasn't allowed, right? It didn't complain about the Groovy script because those are allowed. It didn't complain about the XSLT style sheet because XSLT is allowed, but the specific version of XSLT was not allowed. Okay, so let me jump back to the slides. Okay, so let me expand a bit on how it actually works. The rules are the central part of CPILint, and what they do is they inspect integration flow artifacts. And the integration flow artifact is what gets created behind the scenes when you build a new iFlow in CPI, right? And the artifact contains a bunch of metadata about the iFlow, various resources like script files, XSLT files like in the demo, schema files, and so on. And most importantly, it contains an XML document in the BPMN format describing the iFlow. And some of the rules, they only inspect the resources, like for instance, the one about XSLT versions, but most of them examines that BPMN2 XML of the iFlow itself. And as I mentioned, you can run it locally. You can download your iFlows to your machine, or you can point the tool to your tenant, and it will use the OData API to fetch your iFlows and then run the checks against the rules you've chosen. Oh, yeah, there's a couple of more examples of rules here. I'm not going to read them all, but yeah, adapters that you allow, don't allow. You can check for duplicate resources, client certificates and sender channels, and so on. All the rules are in the wiki on the GitHub page. I'll show you those later. Some of them only inspect a single iFlow at a time, right? So if it checks for, is this iFlow using allowed mapping types, it only needs to look at that single iFlow, right, to determine if there's compliance. Other rules look at all the iFlows in order to determine compliance. For instance, the one about duplicate content needs to see every iFlow, right, in order to determine if there are duplicates. And if an iFlow is not compliant with a rule, it creates an issue. And that issue contains the various information you need in order to take action on this problem, right? So which iFlow, which mapping or channel or whatever or resource contains the problem. And that's contained in the issue. And yeah, it's a command line application. So at the moment, all the issues are written to the console, to your terminal. But there are many possibilities on how to enhance this in the future. You might want to add it to some sort of issue tracker, like Jira, for instance, right? An incident tracker. You might want to post it to like a Slack channel or maybe Microsoft Teams for someone to see and take action on. Or maybe, yeah, send out an email or a text message or something like that, right? So there's quite a few possibilities in order for how to enhance this. But at the moment, they're just written to the terminal, like you just saw in the demo. Yeah, it's, as I mentioned, it's open source and it's free. So what does that mean for you? Well, first off, obviously it means that you have access to the source code, meaning all the files needed to build the code. So source code, build files, etc. It's all there. It's on GitHub and included when you download the tool. So if you want to learn about how it works, you can definitely do that. Second, and more importantly, the license allows you to modify the code as well. The open source license is basically what determines what you can do with the code and what you cannot do. And CPILint is released under the MIT license. And unlike some or many other open source licenses, MIT is very short, it's very straightforward. You don't need to be an expert lawyer in order to read it, and it's very permissive. So you can do pretty much whatever you want. So if there's something you want to add or change, you can just go ahead and do that because the license allows it, right? Okay, so briefly about what it takes to run the tool. CPILint is written in Java. So to run it, you need a Java 11 runtime, and that's it. So if you just want to install the tool and use it to do governance of your CPI content, you just need the Java 11 runtime. Everything else is included in the file that you download. If you want to build the code and play around with it, you'll need some more stuff. You'll need a Java 11 JDK for the compilation, Apache Ant for the build process, and Apache Ivy for the dependency management. But But if what you want to do is run the tool and use it, you only need the Java 11 runtime. So how to get started? Yeah, it's pretty easy. Go to GitHub and download the latest release, and follow the installation instructions in the wiki, and that's it. Then you're up and running. I'm just gonna briefly switch to GitHub. Yeah, so this is the project on GitHub. The link is in the slides as well. So you go to the latest release and download that, and then go to the wiki, where you'll find this installing and running CPILint page. It's very easy to set up. There's launch scripts for Windows and Linux and Mac OS included in the download. If you should be on some other exotic platform, I kind of doubt it, but if you are there, you can still run it, and there's instructions in there as well. Okay, so let's getting a bit short on time, so let's talk about what's next, what I'm working on. Definitely more rules. One of them is naming rules. They are not done yet, but I'm working on it. I spoke to quite a few people at TechEd who mentioned that this is something that they are really interested in automating, checking local naming rules for the various parts of the iFlows, right? And you will be able to do that. It's not done yet, but hopefully in the not too far future. Also, extensibility, in the sense that you will be able to add your own rules, for instance, and your own issue handlers. So if you have something very specific that you want to do with an issue, you will be able to write an issue handler for your specific situation, right? And then add it to CPILint, and then you'll run your own code whenever an issue occurs. In order to do that, that requires some developer documentation, and what it has at the moment is more user-oriented documentation, but there'll be some more specific documentation of the code aimed at developers. Also, more output options for the command line output, so like aggregating issues that are the same across iFlows and so on. More sanity checks of the rules, so you don't, for instance, allow and not allow something at the same time. At the moment, you can do that, and that doesn't make sense, of course. If you have ideas or suggestions, you can create a GitHub issue. Issues on GitHub are not just for like bug reports. You can also use them for feature requests like this. So feel free if you have an idea to just create an issue on GitHub. That was the last slide. So, and we do have a few minutes left. So if there are questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yes, we have questions. We have time left. So there are currently no questions. One question coming. Feel free to raise your hand, and then we can unmute you if you want, or type it.
Okay, so yeah, there's a question here about if you run the tool against your tenant, whether it checks on per package or per iFlow. Did I get that right? So at the moment you can specify individual iFlows, or you can basically request to have everything checked. So that means every iFlow in every package. And if you go with the latter option, you can choose to exclude SAP packages, and you can exclude specific iFlows by ID that you don't want to check for some reason. What you can't do at the moment is say I want to check all iFlows in a specific package. But I'd say if that's something that would be useful, create an issue for it. It wouldn't be very hard to implement actually, because it's pretty much what it does already, is iterate over all the packages and get the iFlows. So that would be possible to do as well. So if that's the case, yeah, create an issue and we'll have a look at it. Okay, there's a question here about if it would be possible to get it certified by SAP. Well, I'd say that basically the touch point between the tool and your tenant is the OData API. So it's pretty limited in that sense, but certification, yeah, it might be possible. I haven't thought about that, but it's a good point, and I will think about it. It might very well be possible to have it certified somehow by SAP.
So, Martin, there's another question in the chat. Is it possible to define external parameterization as mandatory and disallow entering configure parameters directly in adapters?
That's a very interesting question. At the moment, no. But that would be possible, yes, to create such a rule. Because I'm already looking at external parameters in order to replace them with their configured values, right? In order to check rules. So it would be possible to, for certain parameters, create a rule saying this needs to be, or certain values in the configuration of a channel, right? To say that this needs to be externalized. That's very interesting. Thanks for pointing that out. That's a good idea. Yes, that's possible.
There's another question. You can decide which one you want to start with.
A version for on-premise SAP PO. Many customers are still using PO on-premise. Definitely, thousands of customers are running PO on-premise. The tool, I mean, you can reuse the idea, but probably not much more, since PO and CPI are so different, basically, under the hood, right? You also have, I'd say, slightly less of access to the internals in PO. So some of it might be harder, but you would be able to apply the ideas, but not a lot of the code, unfortunately. Are we out of time, Menina?
No, we still have time. Let's
Okay.
say 8 minutes.
Okay. Another good feature could be notifying unused resources in an iFlow. Yeah, I like that idea. That's definitely doable as well. The resources are basically separate entities you can check for and check whether they are referenced from within the iFlow XML. So that's doable, absolutely. It doesn't exist at the moment. I would actually urge you to create that as an issue on GitHub as an idea or feature request to have that. So we have it basically all in one place, but it's doable as well. Then there's a question on, is it possible to add a rule to check for unending loops? That will be very hard because that would basically be, well, no, I don't think that's doable. There are just too many ways to, like in Groovy, for instance, to create an infinite loop. It would be very nice to avoid them, but I think it's no, from statically analyzing the code and detecting infinite loops, I don't think so, unfortunately. Those are in reference to other questions I think we've already answered. So yeah, thanks for the comments and questions, everybody.
There's one comment and one more
Yeah.
question. And let's go to the question first. Any chance to add features to test iFlow using your CPILint as serverless, CLI as use test, AWS Lambda?
Where do you see the
in the
question,
chat?
Menina?
It's in the chat.
Oh, okay. Hang on. Yeah, I don't see why not. It's just a Java class in the end, or a couple of Java classes. So you can run it, and then create a custom issue handler that does something like add something to a queue or call another endpoint or something like that. So yes, you can schedule it, including in also in AWS Lambda. And I don't think that should be a problem. It supports Java as well. So yeah, you can do that. You can schedule it like a cron job running every night or every hour, or yeah. Just need to, if it's not interactive, you will need an issue handler that does something with the issues it finds, right? So like some of those options I mentioned, post them somewhere to Slack, to an issue tracker system, to a queue of sorts. You need to offload them somewhere where someone will take action on them, right? But apart from that, yeah, it's definitely doable to schedule it.
And then we have one comment.
There's a comment from Torsten. Yeah, checking for endless loops, not possible. Yeah, sounds exactly right. From Raphael about extensibility. I think for starters, it will probably be something very basic, like an extensibility folder where you can drop your own jar files in, and in your, like from the command line, you can say that the issue handler is going to be this class, and that will be loaded at runtime, right? Something along those lines. So pretty basic, I think, for starters, just to get this out there and yeah, have people build some extensions. But it's something we can discuss definitely, and I would like to talk to you about it. What your thoughts are. Can you validate the XSD? So, like, I'm not sure what you have in mind here. Validation of whether a schema file uploaded to CPI would be valid, or well, yeah, that would be possible. Definitely. I think you would, if you use a schema file in CPI and it's not valid, you will find out very quickly. But validating them, the schema files themselves should be possible as well. Yeah, doesn't exist at the moment, but definitely could.
Okay, I think it's a really lovely discussion, and you could continue here, probably.
Sure.
And I would say the call for now we can leave it as is. Thank you very much, Morten. I think it
You
was
too.
very insightful, and it's great to see so many questions coming in and people attending this call. This call is recorded and will be uploaded to the SAP Community Calls page in the SAP Community, and that's also where you can find upcoming calls as well. And that's where I would say for now we'll end this call. And have a nice day, everyone. Thanks again, Morten.
You too. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.